This is Insight 2015. Here's Charlie Sykes.
For those of you who are listening to this on the radio, you can't see that Sheriff David Clarke has now joined us wearing the very, very impressive cowboy hat. Yeah! And once again, he does every year make the rest of us feel underdressed. So thanks for joining us, Sheriff Clarke. I appreciate it. And also joining us on stage is the newly elected Attorney General of the state of Wisconsin, Brad Schimel, Wisconsin top. A lot to talk about, but I want to start off by following up our conversation we had with Kurt Bauer from WMC in the last segment. Attorney General Sharon, one of the first things you did when you took office was to begin preparing legal action against the Obama administration. And you know, this is one of the big questions is, you know, what are the possible responses to the executive overreach we're seeing at the federal level? So I just want to ask you about, you know, what is the status? What are you planning on doing, Wisconsin Attorney General's office, perhaps to push back against some of these EPA regulations on coal?
Well, the first thing we have to do is wait until they announce their final rule this summer. If it is anything like the rule they announced last June, we'll be suing. There are really two issues, and one is the process one, that this is the administration taking power that belongs to Congress and expanding the Clean Air Act into something that was never intended. And then the other issue is the disproportionate harm to Wisconsin, and we have to protect Wisconsin jobs in this. Wisconsin is a clean coal state, and we get about 2/3 of our energy from clean coal. Well, the EPA has manipulated this. For instance, they chose a year to use as a baseline that we had an unusually low amount of coal energy used that year. So that makes it harder for us to meet their standards. They don't take into account that we've spent nearly $12 billion in the last decade upgrading our clean coal power plants. And you know who pays for that? It's us. The energy companies pass that on to us as they're allowed to do. So we have to watch out for that. And Wisconsin being one of the top manufacturing states in America, if we see the cost of reliable electricity go up, we're going to see them leave the state.
Well, I mean, I'm looking at this from the point of view, you know, the fact that we are a state that uses a lot of juice and would kill these jobs, of course, but there's also been, of course, the legal issue that you're going to be handling in the federal courts. And Lawrence Tribe, very well-known Harvard law professor, was testifying, and he says that the Obama administration, in his opinion, was shredding the Constitution again, but shredding the Constitution when it comes to these EPA regulations, and that's obviously the case. How many states are involved in this lawsuit?
I think. Well, we're not to that point yet. Okay, we're still getting to that.
Right, you're still waiting for the actual rule to come down. The governor has also said planning to sue the federal government on the immigration issue, on the governor's, the president's unilateral amnesty. Is that something else you're going to be handling?
We are involved in that, and actually that is underway. The district judge in Texas imposed an injunction now, and there will be a trial. But right now, it's enjoined from going forward. There will be a trial, and eventually it'll probably end up in the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals in New Orleans, and maybe the Supreme Court eventually. It might take so long to get there, we might have a new president by then, and maybe this will all get resolved then. But for now, it's stopped. And I'm very proud of our team at DOJ. Our lawyers put together a great affidavit outlining how this will impact Wisconsin negatively, and their affidavit was cited in the judge's decision.
Yeah, the reason I wanted to lead off with this, of course, is this whole question of executive overreach. We're in this era now where it doesn't appear that we know exactly what does the law say. Is the law what is written, or is the law what the Obama administration chooses to enforce or chooses to ignore? What's in the Constitution? Does it exist? And it does seem to be coming down to state attorney generals who are going to be playing a much more significant role. Do you agree with that? I mean, I was asking, Senator Ron Johnson, what do you do about this? And it does not appear that Congress is going to do anything particularly effective about this.
No, they're stuck. And even if they pass a law, it's going to get vetoed, and they're not going to have the power to override it. This absolutely falls in the hands of the states to defend themselves.
Sheriff Clarke, you've talked a lot about these constitutional issues. I want to get to a lot of other issues, but you have been very, very outspoken on this whole question of what is the law, and does the law that binds the rest of society, does it bind our government as well? And I think that's got a lot of people frightened.
Yeah, just a little bit. Constitution doesn't seem to matter right now. Constitution's been obliterated. I think it's a shame. You know, in a democratic state like the United States of America is a form of government. The rule of law is the foundation. And without the rule of law, you don't have anything. So it's a slippery slope. And once you start to head in that direction, it is a really fast descent into the chaos that we see, and a lot of the uncertainty and a lot of the faith that people are losing in our system of government.
The Obama administration has been very, very aggressive in going after some of these constitutional provisions, including the Second Amendment, which is something you've been very, very involved in. At least gun rights advocates have successfully been able and willing to push back, and occasionally even gotten the Obama administration to back off. I'm not sure that in other areas of constitutional law there's the same kind of pushback.
Yeah, I'll tell you, they're well organized. Gun owners, and several gun owner groups, NRA is one of them. I happen to be an endowment member myself. Then there's the Gun Owners of America, and there's several other ones. You have to be well organized and well funded to take on these anti-gun folks. People like Michael Bloomberg, who is about to spend $50 million of his own money to go after Second Amendment's 40 candidates like myself.
Yeah, that worked out so well for him last year. Great return on investment for Michael Bloomberg. Let's take a quick break when I come back because I want to talk about some of the things that you have been talking about recently.
Insight 2015. Here's Charlie Sykes.
Coming up in the next segment, we're talking with Sheriff David Clarke and Attorney General Brad Schimel. I remember, Brad, that we talked about legalizing marijuana the last time you were on this program, and it is interesting. There's a lot of people who listen to our program, a lot of people who are conservatives, who believe that the war on drugs has been a failure and believe that we need to put law enforcement resources into more productive areas. Should we consider decriminalizing marijuana or moving in the direction of some states like Colorado?
No. Now, first off, I think it's a mistake to have ever called this a war on drugs. That implies things that we're not doing. But these drugs have declared war on our kids. You know, not every kid who smokes marijuana goes on to use heroin or other harder drugs, but every single one of them, or nearly every one of them who uses those harder drugs, started with marijuana. Now, the marijuana that's available for sale now is not anything like the marijuana that was for sale in the streets 20 years ago. It is much more powerful, it's much more addictive, and frankly, when the president has talked about this, he has ignored the science. The Centers for Disease Control say that 1 in 6 who start using marijuana become addicted. That is way too high a number. And you know, how are young people going to have jobs if we encourage them to use a drug, or not? Well, we're not encouraging them to use it, but we're saying it's okay. We sanction it. They use a drug that stays in their system for 30 days. How are they going to get a job in manufacturing, construction, nursing, you name it, all the way down the line? What jobs can they get?
Slippery slope, and we're not having an honest discussion. It's a one-sided discussion. And I don't mind if states want to have that discussion on whether to legalize it. I'm not for it, but this thing is being done in a very sneaky way when they talk about medical marijuana. They'll wheel people in, you know, talk about how it's helped them with some of their ailments. And I'm not here to argue science with that, but there's a lot of research out there that I've seen that talks about the health risks associated with using marijuana. We're talking about things like drug driving will go up. We're talking about the lost productivity at work. You know, those things aren't being
same things about alcohol. And I guess that's an analogy people get hung up on. So people can, you know, leave this event and go home and they can pour themselves some whiskey. They can pour themselves some gin or some brandy, which sounds pretty good right now. But, and so you have, and all the things you just described can be associated with alcohol as well, and yet we don't criminalize alcohol.
Well, first of all, just because we legalize one vice doesn't mean that we should have two. That would be my first thing right out of the gate. The other thing is, you know, the research will show you can have a glass of wine, 2 glasses of wine. It's going to have a whole different effect than smoking a half of a marijuana cigarette. So, you know, what the THC does physiologically to the body is a lot different than alcohol. Right. I don't like the fact that we're not being told everything and the honest truth about the effects of smoking marijuana.
You know, what's important is the sheriff makes a good point. You can predict what's going to happen. We're pretty good at predicting what's going to happen. You can drink a certain number of beers or a certain amount of wine. You can't do that with marijuana. And you know, the folks out in Colorado claim that this is only for adults. I'd like to know why then are they making pot candy? You know, Nebraska and I think Kansas are suing Colorado right now because their states are all full of pot candy that's flown out from Colorado.
In the time that we have left, as of April 1st, we have a new law in the state of Wisconsin now providing for the collection of DNA on arrest for certain crimes. How do you respond to people who are concerned about the slippery slope of privacy violation now? Because it used to be that you had to be convicted of a crime, and only certain crimes, to be able to have that DNA taken. Now it is arrests and all convictions of things like misdemeanors.
Well, what's important for people to know is that there are very important safeguards in place. First off, the federal government isn't going to find out who you are. There are only a couple people in state government who will have access to connect the DNA profile with the identity of a person. We will never send that to the feds. It simply goes to the National Data Bank, and they tell us there's a hit. We come back then, and now one of those few people can make the connection to the identity, and then we have a basis to go forward with an investigation.
Sure. It's real simple for those that have privacy concerns with collecting DNA upon arrest. Don't get arrested.
Again, inside 2015, Sheriff David Clarke, the Attorney General of the state of Wisconsin, Brad Schimel. Coming up in just a couple of moments, our pundit panel, Colin Roth, Matt